Hello everybody, and welcome to Some Patches Required, a show where we hope to educate and entertain you on the ever-turbulent games industry. As always, I am one of your hosts, Aaron.
And I'm your other host, Zach.
And this week we are going to be jumping into a fairly light topic, actually, for once. And it is, of course, the thing that I believe a fair amount of the internet is talking about, which is the runaway success and some of the story behind Hollow Knight Silksong, which is taking Steam and other various platforms by storm as we speak, literally. But before we get into the meat of that, as always, we would, of course, like to extend a hearty thank you to all of our new and returning listeners. If you've been with us from the jump, that's awesome, and thank you for coming back for another round. I know we were gone there for a little bit, but we are, in fact, back. And if you are just a new listener, there's no such thing as just a new listener. We appreciate you and we love you. And ignore that thing I said about us being gone for a minute. That never happened, and don't pay attention to it. But if you would all collectively not mind too terribly, hitting the engagement button on your platform of choice, giving us a like, leaving comments down below, or, of course, sharing the show with a friend or mortal enemy. That is really our best and only way of growing as a show, and we genuinely appreciate it. And, yeah, on the note of comments, if you are so inclined, feel free to pop down into the under the video component of YouTube and let us know kind of how you're faring in Silksong, because based on all available evidence, it is a brutally hard game that I have heard kind of victimizes its players in a way that is not exactly friendly. So yeah, if you're want to tell us to get good or want to share your story of woe, feel free to pop down in the comments and do so.
Yeah, and I'll just say that I caught a little bit of a yawn there, Aaron. You properly caffeinated this morning?
Oh, I am horrifically undercaffeinated. Thank you for asking.
You need to go to our new sponsor, Gamer Sups, and just kidding. If only.
Of course.
If we ended up getting a waifu shaker, not only do I think Aaron's parents might just abandon him in a forest because of how appalled they'd be by the artwork on it, but it's a dream of mine.
This has really been the goal of the show the whole time, is just to get us to that point.
To get a waifu shaker. No, I won't lie, though. Actually, I got some Gamer Sups last week. One, their delivery takes like 5 years. I won't even lie to you. Like, they're like, it takes like 2 to 3 business days. It took like 7. Anyway, regardless, I've been pounding goof juice, which sounds like a drug. But
at least I know what the stinger at the end of the episode is going to be.
It sounds like a drug. I've literally been pounding it. I swear, since I got it, I have not been able to fall asleep at a decent time, which is not all that abnormal. But like, I've been trying. Like last night, I was like, I got to record a podcast episode in the morning. I'm gonna go to bed early, and I'm just like twisting and turning because the goof is in my veins.
The goof juice runs strong.
Yeah, it's pretty messed up. But anyway, that has nothing to do with Silksong, except for the fact that Charlie, Moist Critical, does in fact love Silksong, and that is his flavor of goof juice, which just sounds weird when I think about what I'm saying. So anyway,
do take
before
that out of
I
context.
Contemplate my mortality any further. Yeah, so to your point, Silksong came out like, finally, what was it, 2 weeks ago, something like that?
The internet can stop complaining. I think it was 9 days ago, like last week sometime.
The internet has the answer to this by going to Steam. It was September 4th, which was like 2 weeks ago.
Okay, like 2 weeks ago.
As of Thursday would be 2 weeks ago. So a little over a week ago. So, you know, this game came out. People were memeing on it. I was telling Aaron, you know, all the jokes of I'm going to have kids and be retired by the time that Silksong comes out. So people are very excited. I think what's surprising about this game is that I was just looking online. It seems like there were some articles that were suggesting it was going to be out before the holiday season for 2025. But for the most part, I don't think people believe that because the game, I believe it was supposed to come out originally in 2023 and then it got pushed back. Because wasn't that one of the big things? Like Jeff Keighley went out and was like, Silksong will be coming out this year.
Yeah. I think there's been a lot of sort of false starts with Silksong. Almost so many that I cannot keep track of them. But yeah, I mean, it was originally announced as DLC for the original Hollow Knight, and then it kind of got spun off into its own thing, and then they just kind of the Team Cherry, the small indie team behind Hollow Knight and Silksong, just kind of disappeared for a little bit, and then there would be like teases of news coming out, and then nothing would really come out, or then Jeff Keighley would say something on a stage somewhere, and then nothing would happen with it, and so the entire internet kind of felt gaslit by this game for almost 8 years. Which almost made it's almost the best marketing they could have come up with in some way.
Yeah, gaslit, but no girl bossing, which of course is a cardinal sin. Yeah, it is kind of a wild story of a team of 3 people largely developing this game. Now, I haven't done a ton of digging. My gut feeling is that they probably contracted out a little bit of it to some degree. I don't know if it was like 100% a 3-person team all the time. I haven't been able to do that much digging into like the actual proper development. But the interesting thing is that like part of the reason it did take so long is because they didn't want to scale up the team too much. They wanted to be able to take their time. They made something like $15 million on Hollow Knight. So, you know,
it's a decent nest egg.
Well, I'm not like a math savant here, Aaron, but, you know, if you take 15 million and you divide it between 3 people, that's still pretty good. Like, you know, it's only $5 million.
Yeah,
but
which you can almost live off of for 8 years.
Yeah, in Australia, the land of the kangaroo. I should be clear that obviously not all that 15 million went to them. Like, obviously, some of that went to paying for Unity licenses, as an example, or paying platform fees, etc. But and I mean, ultimately, a lot of it probably went into the development of this game. Realistically, when I say this game, I mean Silksong. But you know, the point is, they made enough money that they didn't need to rush the development of this next game. And you know, ultimately, I think that's pretty commendable, and clearly it worked. I mean, if we look at the numbers here, 3 million plus copies sold, 5 million plus players across all platforms, which, okay, I think that's kind of a funny statistic, just because when you like hear that first, Aaron, you're like, wait a minute, how the hell did they sell less copies of the game, but they have more players across all platforms? Well, part of it, I believe, is Game Pass. I think it's on Game Pass. I'd have to double check that. It's still a funny stat to see.
Yes, I was caught off guard by that one initially as well.
$50 million in revenue, an estimated $50 million in revenue. So, you know, I'm sorry, they're really struggling financially.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough year.
And honestly, the interesting one here is 78% of players on Steam also played Hollow Knight. So I realized the way I intonated that sentence was kind of confusing. But anyway, so basically that means that 660,000 potential new players on Steam. And what I meant by that, I made this note, is like almost 500,000 players could have just been hyped up about this game on Steam and just gotten it. So there's like a pretty good transfer rate from the first game to this one, but it's kind of cool to see that, 22% of people on Steam at least just kind of were like, yeah, I'll check this game out. People seem to be excited.
which is awesome. I think, again, sort of contextualizing the numbers as what I'm going to think of, at least, as something like a celebration of indie creativity in a lot of ways, because the cynical part of your brain goes, okay, these numbers, especially the ones that we're about to get into here, which are reasonably staggering, are because of this 8-year hype cycle, which I don't think you can really claim that the entire 8 years was part of the hype cycle, because Hollow Knight came out, it was a kind of a sleeper hit. Like, it wasn't like a massive out the gate sort of cannon blast of a game that had this like gigantic peak and surge in players and enthusiasm, but players did surge to the game eventually, and it became obviously very enthusiastic about it. But then the game just sort of cultivated this legacy of being an extraordinarily good, well-designed, beautiful Metroidvania, and it fostered this wonderful little community. Not little, obviously, this wonderful, rather large community. And then
puny community.
Yeah, just feeble and impotent community. And the end result was, Hollow Knight made enough money to keep the lights on over at Team Cherry and keep their developers employed, and it gave them the flexibility to just have fun and iterate and design. And based on interviews that I've read with the developers, a lot of the reason that the game took as long as it did is just because they kept coming up with cool ideas that they didn't want to not have in the game. So they just kept adding stuff to the game, not in like a terrible scope creep way, but just in a, we're having fun with this, let's just cook and see what comes out of it way. And then to have that level of, autonomy within their creative process rewarded by this level of success right out the gate is kind of a different story than we tell on this show very often. One of the, to peel back the curtain a little bit, one of the alternative topics that we were going to discuss, and may still, so I'll keep it reasonably vague, was, dipping our toes back into the well of making a good game does not guarantee success in this industry, especially at this time. And that's kind of a bleak but truthful reality of the modern games industry, and possibly the games industry at large forever. But making something good does not inherently guarantee its success. So to see this game, clearly made by a passionate small team of people who just enjoyed the process of making it, do this well, is nice and worth highlighting, in my opinion. It's just pleasant. It's a nice change of pace.
I mean, it's certainly, a nice thing when we don't have to talk about CEOs trying to make a platform for pedophilia and censorship by payment processors. It's kind of neat to not have to cover more existential issues for games or children. I will say real quick, because I was reviewing our notes and I actually got something wrong. So it's 15 million copies were sold at $20, which actually means that on Hollow Knight, the original one, they made $300 million. Okay. So, they went from pennies to nickels, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, still feeble in the grand scheme of things, but, they're scraping by.
And the other thing, I would have to look into this a little bit more, but I think Silksong was conceived as an expansion for Hollow Knight. I don't know if it was it announced as an expansion too? Because I know that the article said conceived. It doesn't ultimately matter too much. I'm just trying to keep us honest as we try to trick our audience.
It is a good question. I'll be 100% honest. I do not remember.
I think it was conceived as an expansion. Anyway, sorry, I was just looking through our notes and I was like, I don't want to be a liar. Yeah. But no. Exactly to the point that you had mentioned. This is largely just a happy tale of a game coming out, doing pretty well. And the crazy thing is that when we look at the peak player count for the game, it was 587,000 players, which beats Helldivers by roughly 100,000 CCU. And if you remember from the episode we did when we were covering Helldivers, that was a huge game. Massive game, massive launch. And almost more impressively is that it is kind of clobbering the Borderlands 4 peak CCU, which is only kind of wild because it further validates this idea that just because you're a AAA game does not necessarily mean that you're going to be getting the most players at a time from like a peak perspective.
Yeah.
So just super interesting to see this. I mean, it's still an indie game, even though it's well known as like a brand. But see it beat something like Borderlands 4 is pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I mean with the additional and potentially very minor caveat that these numbers are of course coming from SteamDB, so we're only talking about peak players on Steam, and Borderlands 4's PC launch has been pretty notoriously dog shit. So it's possible that the PC performance issues in Borderlands 4 are contributing to the lower peak player count. But, you know, regardless, it is still wild to see, you know, massive company behind Borderlands 4, storied, cross-generational franchise with enduring appeal, just be thoroughly trounced by this very small little game. Which is yeah, it's pretty remarkable. It's a pretty remarkable success story.
Yeah. And the bigger point that is kind of impressive or interesting to us that makes this a topic we can't exactly avoid is all of this came out for $20, which I believe is the same price that the original game had released for, and they certainly could have sold the game for at least $40. I have some friends, I was telling Aaron, that would apparently buy a console to play this game, which I think is personally wild, but
that's whack.
You know, regardless, people were willing to pay more in order to play this game. I also think, Aaron, this might be a good time to just say, like, we don't personally play Hollow Knight. I can speak for myself. I'm not very good at 2D platformer games, and I'm also not necessarily very good at Souls-like kind of games that are challenging. I don't even know that Hollow Knight in reality is even very much like a Souls-like. I think that just gets applied to everything that's even difficult now, so, you know, ignore my comment there. But yeah, I'm just not very good. It's not really a game for me.
Yeah. It is, despite the fact that I've been very vocal about my, let's say, skill limitations when it comes to video games, I actually do enjoy games like this to some degree. I've played both of the Ori games, which are absolutely phenomenal and also, in my opinion, quite difficult 2D Metroidvania games. I absolutely adore those games, and I have played the original Hollow Knight. I don't think I exactly get why it was the phenomenon that it was and remains, but I have played it. It is good. I mostly just am bad at games that have a heavy emphasis on parrying. That's a big problem for me. The timing on a parry is not really except for Expedition 33, which is immaculate and made me want to get better at that. And actually did make me get better at that, which is kind of astonishing. But yeah, I have not played Silksong. I don't think there's a great deal of story continuity, and I could be completely wrong. Feel free to lambast me in the comments if I am incorrect. But yeah, I have not played Silksong, and I have not beaten Hollow Knight, so I am kind of talking out of my ass just a little bit when it comes to that. But yeah, that is an important caveat, an important little codicil to add to the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I mostly just bring it up so if there's we're not going to talk a ton about like the gameplay mechanics of this because we just don't know because we really haven't played it. But we can talk about the fact that in a world where games get more and more expensive, I mean, we just had an episode. Well, originally we had an episode on why $70 was kind of crazy for the base price of a game. And then we had another episode where we were talking about $80 with the Switch and whatnot. So, and that was just announced this year too. So as games are trying to get more expensive, we actively see Silksong release at $20 when they, as I said, did not need to do that. I mean, honestly, looking at their PC sales numbers, because that 3 million copies sold is actually the PC count. It just doesn't include all platforms. So that's part of why there was that difference between players across all platforms, etc. But they could have probably sold roughly 3 million plus copies and been a $40 game. Or at least a $30 game, not 35. Like, this is a beloved game. 78% of people on Steam that played Hollow Knight ended up buying this game. Like, I think that same number would have probably moved on to Silksong regardless of price, because there is such a cult following.
Yeah, I mean, the fervor around this game's release, even in the complete absence of updates on its development, was such that I almost think not any necessarily, but almost any traditional publisher or larger studio with a more traditional structure, namely a CEO and investors and people like that, would have looked at this and seen a gold mine for opportunistic pricing, right? Because when you have a dedicated fan base and a fan base this dedicated to this franchise, to this specific property, they could have absolutely gotten away, especially since the game itself is at a larger scale than the original Hollow Knight, based on my understanding. They absolutely could have gotten away with upping the price. They could have charged, probably, like Zach said, like you said, rather, $30 or $40, still gotten that exact same 78%, and then counted on, sales and word of mouth to spread for the rest. I don't think that would have been the most egregious thing I've ever seen, and I certainly think it probably would have been tempting. But instead, they went with 20. In defiance of God and man, they went with the $20 price point, and it's kind of wonderful. It's kind of counterculture in a way, and I appreciate it, I guess, even though I haven't purchased the game. I almost certainly will at some point play Silksong. And I don't know, I kind of admire the fact that it stuck to its original price point. And I part of me does wonder, because I understand pricing the original Hollow Knight at $20. I even probably would understand $15 for that game, not because it has a lack of content or it's not a polished experience or worth more money necessarily, but more so because if you're an unknown team releasing just a game inside of a crowded space within that genre, because Metroidvanias are a very popular genre, and throw in the Souls-like flavor and you are in the most crowded field imaginable right now. Having a game that's priced to a point where word of mouth can spur an impulse purchase, or even a moderate sale can bring it to impulse purchase levels for people, I think is a really strong way of getting the game in more people's hands. And when you're just starting out, that's basically half the battle, right? Like, your game can be incredible, but if nobody plays it because it's just not spreading quickly enough, then you're going to fade into obscurity and there will be no Silksong. So that strategy makes a lot of sense to me for the first one. For this one, I don't know if they're trying to employ a similar sort of tactic and hope that, the word of mouth marketing that's carried them this far can spread even further with a reasonable price point, or if they're just like, nah, that's just a reasonable price for the game, and that's what we're going to charge. I don't know. It'd be interesting to hear what the rationale is from the people who actually set that price point. But in terms of speculation, I don't know. I mostly just see sunny sides.
Yeah, I've watched some videos of people talking about them only charging $20, and it's funny because a lot of the people, there's some people that are like, you should charge more. Like, I'm concerned about you being able to stay in business. You should charge more. But it's funny, it's only a 3-person team. And so, and they don't have a publisher. Their fees are probably pretty limited to platform and engine fees. Like, if they're okay potentially making less money on this game and it's still worth it to them in terms of like the amount of time that they put into the game for the money that they're getting out of it, you know, it could just be fine. Because they've already made $15 million. It could just be that they're okay with that and they're not particularly like capitalist minded, right? Like they don't need the number to necessarily go up any more than it has. I mean, they're already, all 3 of them are probably millionaires at this point, unless they're doing like crazy reinvestment into the company. I'm assuming they've kept some of it for themselves in some form. So it is it's kind of an interesting thing of what you can do from a pricing perspective when you don't have a publisher or some other entity that you're beholden to for like, you know, stakeholder value. And yeah, I mean, it's just a cool thing to see, honestly, because you so often do see this price increase when you move on to the sequel. Because and it's normally because, to your point, you can justify it. You're not as concerned about trying to attract people by being a cheaper option. You're already a brand name, so to speak, so you don't need that extra appeal. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. I'll be curious if there's any talks or further discussion that comes from it. My gut feeling is there probably won't be, because I don't know that they'd want to share that kind of information. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they'll have like a GameIndustry.biz article that comes out that's like, why we released Silksong for $20, and it elaborates on their thought process. But yeah, I mean, I feel like part of it's probably they knew the game was going to sell well enough, and all of their funding for this game was probably just covered by Hollow Knight, and they may just not care about like continuing to stack value and revenue, you know.
Yeah,
I don't know. We'll have to see for the next game.
It's also yeah, that's a good point. But it's also possible that, you know, in terms of playing into a larger strategy, I mean, if you look at the Steam charts for current like regular Hollow Knight, just original Hollow Knight, it actually hit its peak player count just shy of 100,000 players 8 days ago, and the game has been out since 2017. So I think it's possible as well that they understood that there's sort of like a cyclical reflexive marketing situation going on, where people who missed Hollow Knight the first time around are aware of the hype train for Silksong and are then going to go back and play Hollow Knight, by which I mean buy Hollow Knight. Which means they're kind of getting to double dip with the launch of this one game, because the word of mouth marketing has been so incredibly strong over the course of the last, 7-8 years. So I don't know, maybe they just thought there was no real sense in I mean, for lack of a better term, getting greedy with it. And they were like, well, I mean, we're going to be pulling in more money from the original release. We're going to be pulling in money from this new release. And there's just no reason to gouge people for a game that we feel is priced reasonably at $20. I can't necessarily speak to their rationale because I'm not there. I would be interested to read that article if it ever comes out, or, if they were to do like a GDC talk or something like that. I think that would be really interesting. But the other thing I think it speaks to in a lot of ways is kind of like what you were saying with the publisher. My final thought is the leanness of the team and the leanness of the development is just something that we're not used to seeing succeed on this scale. Most of the games that you and I talk about, Zach, are a lot of the time, we do spend a lot of time talking about double A's and indie games, but a lot of our time is spent talking about triple A's, where you run into a, like a Spider-Man 2 problem where your game costs $500 million to make because you're employing thousands and thousands of people at various different levels of development, quality assurance, corporate hierarchy, and everybody needs to be able to make their cut back. So they're, of course, laden with a lot more financial baggage than a very small, very lean team is. I mean, it'd be a similar story to something like Stardew Valley, except for the fact that Stardew Valley had a publisher. But I mean, the schedule is set by 1, 2, or 3 people. The development costs are set by 1, 2, or 3 people. And that sort of thing is, I mean, inherently appealing, I think, to people who want to make games but don't want to be stuck in that AAA rat race, where no matter how creative the work is, the goal is always kind of to like scrape every dollar out of players, because that's what the shareholders need is to get line to go up. So yeah, I don't know. I'll keep an eye out for those articles and or GDC talk should they ever happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a good point with people maybe seeing Silksong and then deciding to play Hollow Knight, and then Silksong if they're fairly confident that it's a game that they want to play. A similar kind of parallel to that is the Supergiant games, in my opinion. Like, I really enjoyed Hades, and it made me buy a bundle with all of the different Supergiant games in it. Now, I will say Supergiant is a bit of a different situation because all of their games are drastically different, and some of them are incredibly weird. Like, Pyre and Transistor are just kind of very different than Hades. There's no guarantee that if you like Hades, you will like Pyre, Transistor, or Bastion. Like,
very, very true.
It's just not the case. Obviously, that's different with Hollow Knight. They're largely very similar games. Silksong just builds upon Hollow Knight. And the benefit of it not being something that's super tied to like modern tech is that I don't think Hollow Knight's ever going to feel like an old game, at least not for a while, because it's just a very solid 2D platformer, right? And so people can go back to it. They can come back to it in like 10 years from now, when Hollow Knight Bilkbong is out, and Hollow Knight Bebo, the third Hollow Knight, and
Hollow
they can
Knight
play all 3 of them,
Spinny
and they're probably all going to play pretty similarly, would be my assumption, if another one does come out.
Yeah.
So I think that is a good observation, a good point potentially.
Yeah, and that actually does bring up one little thing that's related that I wanted to mention when it comes to Hollow Knight. And again, this will be straining at the edges of my credibility because again, I have not played Silksong. But the general consensus from everybody that I've heard is that this game plays like Hollow Knight. It really genuinely does feel just like a natural sort of extension of Hollow Knight rather than a complete reinvention of the wheel or something that's even trying to push the Metroidvania genre forward in a meaningful way or fundamentally change or shake up any elements therein. It's just like a foundationally solid, extremely challenging Metroidvania. And I as much as I enjoy ambition and innovation and pushing the envelope and reinventing the wheel, there is something kind of refreshing about a game that just kind of knows what it is, goes for it, and executes on it without feeling the need to get incredibly flashy or experimental. Something that is just foundationally solid can be enough to connect with players. And I think, generally speaking, I mean, sales figures aren't necessarily a good metric for whether or not people are connecting with the game once they've purchased it. But the general consensus online seems to be that people are connecting with the game. And it is kind of nice to see, again, a fairly humble production come out and be as successful as it is and as confident as it is in its presentation and its execution.
Yeah, and I think ultimately we're kind of getting to the point. We knew coming into this that the majority of what we wanted to focus on was the $20 price point, because that's something that we haven't specifically talked about like the $20 price point, but we've had quite a few episodes talking about how we wish people would reevaluate the way that they handled development, reevaluate the way that they handled pricing, and ultimately that pricing component is related to development. And so I felt like, well, we kind of have to cover this to some degree because this just kind of illustrates the value of working on a very like specific vision that isn't this open world AAA live service game that takes millions and millions of dollars to develop, hundreds of millions, potentially, billions of dollars to develop, whatever. It's just like a very clear experience. It knows what it is, and it does a good job of doing that. And it's a very lean team.
Yeah.
And all of that came into play here. And I think it creates an experience where there's a game that's really solid. It's at a price point that's approachable for most people. And yeah, I really just do not have anything super critical to say. I guess the one thing I could say kind of as like a closing salvo here is that it's unfortunate not everyone will be able to have this same level of success. And that's purely just because there are so many games out there. Most indie games do fail. So this is us really kind of focusing in on one of the biggest successes, if not the biggest indie success that has kind of ever happened. So it's not like anybody can do what they're doing, but I think people should try to emulate it to the best of their ability. And generally speaking, they'd probably be more sustainable. Don't necessarily fixate on like making some massive enterprise. Maybe just try to keep your team a little bit leaner so it's a little less expensive. Maybe not make this massive scope creep game, right? So there are a lot of things that Team Cherry has going for them that make them a unique situation. But I hope that it will lead to some positive changes where people maybe feel that they can be empowered with these smaller teams and take more time to develop these games. I don't know. We'll see ultimately what happens. I think the one thing that we would also be remiss to say is that there was one big negative, which is apparently the localization in China was quite bad, like embarrassingly bad. They're apparently working on it, but that is one thing that they apparently did a not great job on, is the Chinese localization. So it's not like it's a perfect 10 out of 10 for the whole world globally, but just wanted to throw that in there. It doesn't necessarily need to get expanded upon, but
that is an important caveat, and you will see that in Steam reviews and whatnot. I guess my sort of closing thoughts, like Zach said, I don't know why I'm addressing the audience instead of you this time, but fuck it.
How dare you?
We kind of knew going into this one that it wasn't going to be like our most incisive sort of episode, nor was it going to be our longest or our most in-depth. But there's just too much going on in this that kind of screams the stuff that Zach and I have been saying on this show for X number of years, that it felt very worth highlighting in the moment. Because again, no opportunistic pricing, small, lean team that led to a artistically and experientially cohesive sort of development process, giving the artists time to, cook and come up with the ideas that would bring them artistic satisfaction and make the game feel like something that was actually made by people who care. And, then seeing it come out to pretty rousing numbers is nice. It's just nice. And for me, it kind of goes into and I understand it's a different level of production, obviously, but it goes into the pantheon of games, with games rather, like Expedition 33, Claire Obscure Expedition 33, which was a lean AA team that executed a beautiful vision on an extraordinary game and was rewarded for it. Or, to kind of echo Zach's point in terms of like absolute smash hit runaway indie successes, games like Stardew Valley, which are still enduring and thriving, despite the fact that that game is, you know, a solid handful of years old. And that was made by one guy because he wanted to make something for fun originally. And yeah, it's nice to see this game come out and do well. Obviously, it's also nice to see the original Hollow Knight do well for the exact same reasons, just without the same level of like insane publicity that Silksong got in the lead up to its release, both, you know, through industry events and also just general word of mouth. It's just a very pleasant little palate cleanser. Nice way to celebrate the fall. Even though apparently the game is making people want to pull their hair out. It's just a genuinely heartening little success story, and also a giant success story that I can't help but hope that we get to talk about more of as the show continues. Just because, you know, Expedition 33 is a great example of what happens when the AAA bloat is stripped out of a development cycle. And this is a great example of what happens when an indie team is given a chance to cook and work, you know, on their own time and to their own vision. And yeah, I hope we get to talk about more of these things rather than more giant, you know, Concord level failures, or the performance issues that plague Monster Hunter Wilds, I think is the most recent one. You know, or any of the other sort of, you know, nightmare scenarios that go on with, like Zach was mentioning, or Roblox or anything like that. It's nice to be able to be happy for and about a game for a minute. So yeah, good job, Team Cherry, and I hope everybody who's playing Silksong is having a great time and is not pulling their hair out.
Yeah, you are making me realize that probably the most successful indie game that's ever come out may very well be Stardew Valley, and that if a second Stardew Valley came out, it might just like make Silksong look like wet noodle.
Very possibly.
If Minecraft was still considered an indie game, it would probably be the biggest indie game. Anyway, I you know, belabor the point. Yeah. No, good news, you know, generally speaking, no dread and misery as we close out this episode and get to our magical thank yous. You know, I'll start it off. Thanks again, Gamer Sups. Look for, I don't know. It's like, I couldn't even think of a flavor. I don't know what our flavor would be. I'll work on that. But no, on a serious note, I would like to thank eDougie Art, because eDougie Art is a wonderful friend of ours, and eDougie Art helped us with a bunch of our original artwork for the podcast. So make sure to check out eDougie Art. Or sorry, it's not even eDougie Art anymore, man. It's Moss Cat Market. Check out Moss Cat Market. They're the same person. They just did a rebrand, and my brain went on autopilot. Go to Moss Cat Market on Etsy or on Instagram. Thank you, Moss Cat Market.
Yes, of course, thank you, Moss Cat Market, and thank you to the ghost of eDougie Art. We miss you, but we love Moss Cat Market so very much. And of course, we also love Beach Girl, the wonderful creator and provider of our intro and outro music, which is still probably my favorite part of the editing process, is when I get to stop listening to my terrible voice and listen to the music that Beach Girl made for us. And if you like the sound of our intro and outro music and want to hear something that actually sounds completely different but still rad, check out Beach Girl on Spotify, SoundCloud, Bandcamp, basically wherever you can find digital music, you can find Beach Girl's stuff, and I highly recommend it. It's very interesting, some of it's very experimental, and it's a good time for the ears. So yeah, check out Beach Girl.
Sweet. And with that, thanks everybody for tuning in and joining us on this wonderful, well, it's Monday for us, but you know, whatever day it is for you. And until the next time, thanks for listening, and goodbye.
Indeed. Goodbye.
I've been pounding goof juice